What's going on, everyone? Ains here, Seasoned Gaming, and today we're going to be focusing on PlayStation and where they're driving towards in the next few years, including PSVR2, live service games, acquisitions, technology, and more. Real quick before we get started, just a big shout out to our Seasoned Gaming Early Access patrons and a big thank you for supporting everything we do with the outlet. But no matter what, if you enjoy this content that focuses on the heart of the gaming industry without the BS, please let us know. But for now, PlayStation. So I've talked a little more regularly about them lately, as they are making moves we didn't necessarily see them make during the PS4 generation. While the PS4, of course, was hugely successful and gave PlayStation the reputation for making very high quality AAA cinematic experiences, it was also a very traditional approach. They focused on their walled garden and released primarily single-player games. So let me be clear. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It was the right move for the time, and I think it's fair to say everyone recognizes that today. But times change, and the industry is rapidly shifting, like it or not, to a more connected, online, live service model. And it's clear that the new leadership under Jim Ryan and an increased investment into several areas where PlayStation is behind in today, they recognize it as well. So, with this video, we're going to dive into some specifics, kind of tackle their studios, what they're driving towards, what they're developing, and what you can expect to see in the next few years. Now first, if you watched our video on the big three, you already understand where PlayStation is investing. As a high-level recap, they're driving a large increase in funding towards mobile and PC, and plan to invest upwards of 45% of their total revenue investment into output towards live service or online games. So I'll quickly caveat that this doesn't mean they're leaving the AAA single players behind. In fact, they're investing more into that than they have in the past because their total investment is a lot larger. It simply means that as a company, they're expanding their focus towards filling the gaps they see in their portfolio. So how do they do that? Well, as seemingly with so many major gaming companies today, bulk of it is being accomplished with acquisitions. Obviously, the largest and most significant was Bungie. Now, we're all familiar with Bungie and Destiny, but it's fair to say that they hold a significant part of the responsibility for PlayStation over the next several years. While Bungie's games will continue to be available on all platforms, including Destiny and their upcoming hero shooter from what we know about it, which is codenamed Matter, it is possible they'll have PlayStation-specific features, items, etc., which are always sought after by the community. But the real reason for PlayStation acquiring Bungie is institutional knowledge. Their ability to fail, learn, and build a live service game into one of the biggest gaming communities in the world is priceless, and it's where PlayStation will no doubt lean on heavily in the future to aid their other first-party studios. That said, Bungie is far from alone, so there are several other companies now under the PlayStation umbrella that are working on their own projects, likely in coordination with one another. Let's go through some of them. So Sprite is based in Liverpool in the UK. It was actually founded in 2012 by former developers of Studio Liverpool. Has a long evolution, but it's now a studio of nearly 300 developers with a broad range of experience. Last year when they were acquired, they also added Fabric Games to the team, and the studio is moving to a new 50,000 square foot office, which obviously indicates that PlayStation sees them worth investing into and for the future. So funny enough, the smaller first-party XDev company now occupies the old Studio Liverpool, and that's yet another studio for PlayStation. But back to Sprite, they've developed smaller titles in the past like the Playroom and the Persistence for PS1 VR, but they're the ones working on Horizon Call of the Mountain for PSVR2, and it's clear that PlayStation has bigger plans for them in the future. Some of the information we've gathered points to a, quote, AAA new IP with free-to-play live service structure. So again, you're going to hear about the live service and kind of AAA space a lot with PlayStation in the future, some of which we're going to continue to talk about here. One of the more interesting additions, though, outside of Sprite is Haven Studios. So Haven Studios is the studio that was founded by Jade Raymond. It's located in Montreal. And Jade, if you remember, she got a reputation for the industry leading early Assassin's Creed franchise and then became a vice president most recently for first-party development for Google Stadia. But as we all know, Stadia has now shut down that development. She basically took that experience, began conversations with PlayStation last year, and then were formally acquired earlier this year in 2022. Now, Haven is described as a, quote, ideas studio, where they are looking to push the boundaries of creativity. Their first project is described as a AAA multiplayer experience with systemic and evolving world focused on freedom. So, the mind kind of reels with that description. Now, in a statement, Jade herself spoke to some of the collaboration within PlayStation's new first party. Quote, "We're excited to learn from these world-class studios, as well as the exceptional central creative, technology, and marketing teams whose expertise will enable us to deliver even better games to players." End quote. So as you can see, she kind of leans in on the central creative and technology-focused approach that PlayStation is taking. Another studio in the PlayStation Studios bag is Nexus. Another recent acquisition. They joined PlayStation last year. They're a studio based out of the Netherlands. They're over 20 years old, so they obviously have a lot of experience, and they have specific experience when it comes to porting games. In fact, Spider-Man just launched on PC last week. It was Nexus that led the kind of bulk of porting for that. You can expect Nexus to be the company that helps move a lot of PlayStation games to PC and kind of helps between cross-platform development going forward. One of the other influential studios I wanted to mention that you don't hear about too often is actually London Studio. So they're obviously based in London in the UK, and they're primarily a partner studio that is aided in development, focusing around technology and what they call fresh ideas. But again, as with most of the first-party studios, they're continuing to grow. They're now over 80 employees strong, and they're one to keep an eye on because their impact behind the scenes is large. And if the job listings are true, they are yet another studio working on a, quote, online game for PlayStation 5. Valkyrie Entertainment, meanwhile, founded in 2002, another 20-year-old plus studio. Small studio that has, again, been a support studio. So they've aided game development for first and third-party games. They've been working on God of War Ragnarok. They also even helped with some Xbox titles like Forza Motorsport. But they also primarily have experience with mobile development as well. So you can bet that's where their focus is going to be in the future now that they're first party under PlayStation. As we've talked about in the past, mobile is another focus for PlayStation, yet one that we hear very little about. That will change in the next few years. Of course, we can't leave out Housemarque and Bluepoint, two incredibly talented studios that are both working on, quote, new IPs in some vein. With the support of PlayStation's first party and the focus on online/live service, it's possible we see some entirely new experiences out of these studios, but definitely we'll be keeping a close eye on them. But it's not just acquisitions, right? With PlayStation studios that are working on online games. As we know, Naughty Dog working on a, quote, AAA online Last of Us experience. We've all been waiting to see this and learn more about it. It was originally slated to be an online mode for Last of Us 2, which we remember, but we know that it blossomed into a much larger standalone project. So Last of Us's popularity speaks for itself. We know that Naughty Dog is one of the most talented studios in the world, so there's no reason at all not to expect that this Last of Us, whether it's factions or named something else, becomes kind of a multiplayer juggernaut for PlayStation. Guerrilla has released Horizon Forbidden West. They've got this new IP that is a massive hit and success for PlayStation. It's one of the highest rated games of the year is Forbidden West, and they've been focused on that for a few years now. So while a third Horizon title will no doubt come eventually, rumors have been that at least part of the studio is working on an online multiplayer shooter. Now, of course, Guerrilla has experience with Killzone, and that was kind of a go-to for PlayStation for a number of years. So whether or not they'll revisit that kind of world, or it's something entirely new, we're not sure, but no doubt Guerrilla has experience with those mechanics and systems from the past. Insomniac, one of the most popular studios for PlayStation, has become synonymous with Spider-Man, and we all know, of course, that they're working on Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine. However, listings seem to indicate that they're also working on a third project, which is a multiplayer game as well. So as you can see, if you look across first party, both from acquisitions and their standing studios, there's a lot of multiplayer development going on behind the scene, and that ties to what we've talked about previously, which is that PlayStation wants to have in the realm of 12 multiplayer live service titles by 2025. And if you know, as we've all seen with delays in game development, 2025 is not that far away when it comes to AAA development. So one thing we haven't mentioned so far is the studio support for PlayStation Vr2. They have invested a lot of R&D in the PSVR2, and as it stands, it looks to be one of the premier devices in the VR realm in the near future. So they are expanding first-party efforts for VR development, and it's been detailed in their forecasting that this has a bigger chunk of their development funding than PSVR1 did at the time. So with that in mind, it only makes sense to provide a connected multiplayer VR experience, and I would bet anything you'll see that within the first year of PSVR2's launch. So we'll likely learn more about PSVR2 later this year. We'll see if we get a launch date or release date, and we'll come back in the future to see if I'm right about a multiplayer experience in the first year of that launch. So it should be clear by now that PlayStation has a lot of talent working on multiplayer content from first party, but the delivery of those titles and how they are supported is an entirely different challenge. PlayStation traditionally hasn't been the best at supporting their online titles. Thankfully, PSN, PC support, crossplay are all areas where they've been focusing heavily over the past couple of years. PlayStation has seen fantastic success by porting their games to PC. Games like God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, Death Stranding saw big resurgences when they released on PC, and of course we're seeing the same with Spider-Man since it released last week as we record this. In my opinion, it was long overdue, and now that PlayStation has a taste for that revenue stream, you can bet that their efforts will only expand on this front. But the big question is, how do you deliver those experiences, right? To date, they've released on Steam, which is the obvious choice, but it also comes with compromises. Just this week, we saw outrage due to PlayStation indicating that cross-buy and cross-save are not, quote, currently possible. Of course, these are part of outstanding issues by not having a PC ecosystem with native support. Steam is obviously an entirely separate client and owned by Valve, and while PlayStation sees revenue, minus the percentage that goes to Valve, of course, they don't have full control over user data nor the experience. So how do they solve that? Well, we begin to see rumors last week that PlayStation could be developing their own native PlayStation launcher for PC, and to me that certainly seems to make the most sense. Not only does it solve the most obvious of equations, retaining 100% of the revenue and engagement from their first-party titles, but it would lay the foundation for having a connected PlayStation ecosystem more akin to Xbox, where you can play anywhere and your profile, data, purchases, etc. all travel with you. PlayStation simply hasn't built anything like that in the past, and thus they have a longer tail to reach that foregone conclusion. So from there, PlayStation will then be in a place where they can have a singular PSN account that works across PC and PlayStation, unifies your cloud saves, your purchases, the new app and mobile support, ties your subscriptions like the new PS Plus together, etc. This is where Xbox has driven over the last several years, but I mean, it goes without saying, right, that Microsoft has slightly more resources in this area than Sony, and it just wasn't a focus for Sony during the PS4 generation. Times change, of course. So you've seen some recent successes in these areas if you've been really kind of paying attention to the building blocks that they're doing here. The PlayStation mobile app has improved substantially over the past year. It includes real-time access to clips, pictures, friends, purchases, and more, with a fresh modern UI that shares design sensibilities with the PS5, ties that ecosystem together. Again, that's the theme we're going for here. We've also seen them relaunch PS Plus, as we know, new features such as game trials, expanded game streaming, backwards compatibility, and more. These types of things don't happen overnight. They often take far more time in design and development than most players realize. These things signify Sony's intent to modernize their ecosystem and provide a singular, connected place for all things PlayStation. So I continue to speak about how the industry is evolving faster than it ever has before. PlayStation's not immune to those changes. As always, I try to look at things with a positive light. So imagine a future where Xbox and PlayStation gamers simply have two profiles that contain everything for each ecosystem. So outside of first party, you can play games with friends regardless of where you are, what platform you're on, etc. I mean, if you think about that conceptually, where you could just be on a PlayStation account on a PC playing a game with a friend who's on an Xbox Series X. That we've never had that before. It wasn't that long ago where we were arguing about things like crossplay and cross saves, and PlayStation themselves were challenging the concepts of crossplay while championing sharing things like physical games when the PS4 launched. It's less than 10 years ago. So personally, I think we should be really excited by what's coming. The investments into the gaming space, both from PlayStation and just at large, have never been higher. We've never seen talent influx and introduction into the gaming industry like we have before at the level that we're seeing right now. And it's going to create experiences unlike we've ever seen before as well. PlayStation themselves, they're growing, they're evolving, and I'm incredibly excited to see where they go. For now, we'll keep an eye on this in the future. Thank you as always for supporting Season Gaming and everything we do here, and we will see you next time. Peace.